Yeah, yeah, if that's what you need to do. Or like, have your mom call, like, Mom, please call me. Oh guys, we gotta take a break.
Yeah. Well, that'll be easy for me because historically speaking, my mom calls me every time it's straight. It's true.
Do I have the thing on right? Am I watching you or are we talking?
Well, and with taking breaks too, there's something you mentioned when you notice the table getting worked up about something. Sometimes if you have a co-DM, like I keep an eye on our players and I whack them when they're doing stuff wrong, or if they're starting to get worked up, I might point out to Zach, like, just take a break, or let's leave this NPC alone for a little bit, something, and move us along, because I can tell that our players are starting to get worked up about something, or something's not going the way we expected, so fail. So that's helpful too, with having a DM. Sometimes it's just good backup.
Yeah, just to read the room even.
Yeah.
When you're dungeon master, you're like juggling so much.
Yeah.
All the time. But sometimes it's like, hey, someone's been awful quiet for a little bit. Maybe they need some more like engagement from the world that's happening around them to really stir things up. Absolutely.
Is there any success stories or resources to them?
I mean, when you're co-DMing, your best resource is the other person that's there, right? And for me, a lot of this comes down to communication again. So it's, I was very fortunate that, like you were saying earlier, like talking to other DMs is a very good thing. And I've got a very large community of other dungeon masters that I can draw from, and we kind of treat each other like family, where even if we haven't met, or we've only met at the stream of anything, we kind of get the pass, because WotC keeps us around. So so we can like ping back and forth with each other and ask a question and say like, hey, I noticed that like on your stream you handled this really well, kind of like, and I was wondering like what kind of after effect did that have, but also can you think of anything maybe before the stream that might have tipped that off so that we can be aware of it and maybe working for it? One of the things that one of those DMs was able to impart to me, even as recently as last year, was nonviolent communication. And learning how to request, but also how to be in tune to the other people that are the players, but also, if you're co-DMing, you need to be in tune to that other DM, because building trust is simply about letting people know that their needs are being heard and that you're trying to meet them, or that you two are finding a compromise for them. And that could be an entire table. Sometimes I try and get the table to engage like entirely in a nonviolent path of communication. And it's almost like a new way of asking for things. And a lot of that comes down to giving people the attention that they may be missing in other places, right? Like we all play Dungeons and Dragons to experience, or any role-playing game, to experience things that we don't get to do on a regular basis, and to be empowered. So taking that power from the other players or from the Dungeon Master in the game is kind of, it's kind of inverse of what we're there for. So when I'm playing now, and I try and do this, I try and carry this now into like all aspects of my life, I'm trying to be really considerate about what you're asking for, even if you don't know how best to communicate what your needs are. I can still figure out what it is that you need, and then try and kind of say it back to you and say like, so this is what, is this what you need? This is what I'm kind of picking up, and then like, okay, well, in order for me to feel that way, in order to have my needs met too, this is where I think we can come together and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, that's important, like you said, restating somebody's needs, actually making sure you understand it. Sometimes when you're communicating, in order to have successful communication, you might hear one thing and translate it totally differently. So yeah, repeating back to your players or DMs what you translated their needs to be sometimes is super important.
Yeah, and even just the idea of others first communication is so valuable.
Especially when we get wrapped up.
Yeah, when you get wrapped up, I had another thought, but I just lost it. So find it.
Well, and you also, like, at the table, you know, I'm one of Boots' player, Irene's players, whatever your name is. So, and I'm a DM, so as a player, a lot of times, I see the game a little bit differently, and we've got 7 players, 6 now?
Yeah, 6 now.
So, as a player, if I see that one of the people in our group is kind of like not said anything for a while, like you said, or is kind of slumped off by themselves for some reason, then my character, I'll go engage with them and try to pull them back into the role play or something. So even as a player, you can help your DM with that too. I mean, you don't backseat DM, but like as a player, you can kind of help bring people into the game more too.
I found my thought. So that perfectly led into it. So one even idea of the others first communication is just being responsive to what's happening and being engaged in the present instead of just focusing on this is the thing I want to do, this is the arc that I want to see, or what I'm going to do in my next turn, but also just like paying attention to what other people are doing, what the players are doing, what's actually happening in the world that way. You're not just alert when it comes to your turn, but you can really find where other people are at and construct that narrative together instead of being sometimes accidentally just too absorbed in what you want to do.
Yeah, we're always telling our players, like, not to be looking up spell or anything during somebody else's turn, but each of you are going to get that time. You know, if you have a spell you need to look up, wait, this is this person's turn. Let them do what they're doing, and then when it gets around to your turn, we'll give you that same time. You know, we just have to treat each other with that respect. So we've got about 15 minutes. I thought we might see if anybody has any questions in particular about DMing or co-DMing or anything. No?
Yeah, we have a mic up in the center.
Got a mic. I don't know if we need to use it or if you guys want to shout, but let's try the mic.
What's your question?
So my brother and I, we co-DM one campaign, and we switch back and forth on who's DM and the other one plays. And we've developed a pretty good set for allowing the other person to play while still helping out with each other. My question is, other than the player at the time maybe going the storyline a bit, what are some dangers in having your co-DM playing? Maybe on the side of the other players thinking that that character is special or what it is.
Zach and I have some experience with that, just because we are always playing in each other's campaigns. I run an evil game right now that I run the game, and so I can't talk to Zach about any of it anymore. That's how I try to keep his character separate. If you're co-DMing and you're also playing in the same game, I would just try, I don't know, it's hard to keep information from your co-DM that the other players don't have. So it's almost more important, I don't know, from my perspective, for the other co-DM, whenever you're playing, to not metagame as much as possible, to play your character and not what you, the human, knows. Try to remember to play what your character knows.
Yeah, and I mean, it's definitely possible, but just consider that if you're giving someone meta knowledge and expecting them to not use that meta knowledge, then that's going to be like, they're going to be thinking about what they have to keep under locks the whole time, pretty much. So probably just talking to them about, like, are you okay doing this? How is this benefiting the game? And what aspects of this can we work on building together in a way that doesn't put like all this pressure, like, don't spill this secret, or your character needs to be different than what you know as a player.
I would say that if the person really wants to be invested in that character, it's probably not a good idea to do a co-DM situation. Otherwise, they're mostly playing an NPC. Even if that NPC has a stat sheet and can be helpful in combat, that's kind of like where the line is. Then you're okay. But just make sure that, again, it's communicated in advance what the needs are of the person who is either going to be a co-DM. It's hard to be a co-DM if you're actually at the table rolling dice.
Yeah.
But then again, if you want the kind of co-DM that's like, I'm going to do the logistics and keep track of health points and stuff, then that's something you can have a player do.
Yeah, you're more just being an adjunct.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's what I mean, our game is full of NPCs that will alternate on who plays them. Typically, we try to make sure that each of us play the same NPCs when we can. Typically, we probably have I think we have cards for our city that we've built. I think there's 100 NPCs in there that all have unique backstories and personalities, and so yeah, there's probably about 20 of them each that we almost exclusively play. So, and
Most people don't play that much.
Just-
But yeah, information separate.
but still, it can still be fun when your co-DM, at least for us, plays an NPC, because even though they know where the story's going, that still doesn't mean they can't do things that are unexpected or
I'm
play
still
off
very
of,
difficult NPC.
which I have a good time with. But they can still engage that way, and then as an NPC, and still be a player without really being a player. It's really just them helping drive the narrative in whatever way a particular character or NPC would do. So,
Looks like we have some more questions.
Yeah, next question.
Hi, me and my fiance co-GM a D&D game with all blind players, some of whom can see, well, my fiance isn't blind, but some of whom can see a bit, but some of, like, half of them are totally blind, and I realized that using online sources like Fight Club and D&D Beyond isn't so easy for people who can't see. So, I guess the question I have is, what advice would you give for people trying to run a game for all disabled players?
Rudy.
Yeah, I haven't personal experience, like, having to come at it from that angle, so I have some ideas, but.
I mean, the resources would probably be, I can say that we're doing our best to try and find resources that can be used by anybody, including dots having braille dice and just other things like that. It's, I guess, mostly, I don't know how to say it without, like, I don't want this to sound irreverent, but it's like theater of the mind is going to be the majority of what we're going to run in that. So allow it to be a little bit more fast and loose, I guess. Don't worry so much about, like, really engage in the collaborative storytelling portion and not maybe necessarily so much of the tactics if that's a thing that you feel like might slow you down.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I would say, I've done Discord games, like, I mostly do Dungeon Mastering online, like, I do some in person, but, I've had games where we have had no visual components, it's just been entirely audio, and as long as people have their dice and can come in with their character sheet and kind of know what their character can do, you can absolutely play a game and have.
We've done entire games over Twitter, like just back and forth like that. So
So yeah, I guess just, trying to rely on your verbal resources as much as possible, and, I'll definitely take a look online and see if I can find any resources, 'cause, to Boots' point, I haven't obviously experienced this myself, I haven't tried to run a game like this, but I'll definitely take a look and see if I can find anything else. If you wanna try to find us on the Twitter or something, we'll try to provide some more resources too.
Thank you.
I might even ask. I should see Rook and Raven and stuff like that tonight, so I might even ask them if they're.
Yeah,
They think they're
that would be great. Good.
Jordan's it right there.
Okay, so my question is, so I DM the game, but I don't really control the party, and I don't really, I do in the game. Anything outside the game is complex, more questions. I don't know them very well, and so besides, I run the game, but is it okay that I'm not like the leader of the group, even though I'm the DM?
I'm not the leader. Absolutely. I'm not the leader of my games ever. My players have ultimate agency in everything that's going on, and I just play the reaction of the world. I kind of go by where I say, like, a world with no consequence is of no consequence, but as long as I'm giving them the right context for the world, I'm not in charge. Never. I really, really, really do not like it when people say, well, it's the DM story. I think that I'm just there to make sure that the players have a sounding board, that the world is responding to them.
Yeah, it's a collaborative effort, and I would say, if you're having a hard time talking to those people about, because sometimes as the DM you have to, not put people in their place, but tell them, okay, I need you to work with me on this or something. It might be beneficial to approach it almost like a business partnership in that case, and that would be somewhere where session 0 would really come in handy, set the expectation. I don't know you guys super personally, but these are my expectations. This is how I will address them if needs aren't met, and this is how you can reach out to me if your needs aren't being met. If you don't know them super personally, that might be a good way to be able to open that communication up.
We also use an anonymous survey. So after most sessions, we'll send out like a survey monkey link to solicit feedback or things they liked and didn't like, so that it helps us know going forward what we can do, especially if some of our players don't quite feel comfortable saying, I really didn't like how this worked or whatnot. So that's.
I'm sorry I jumped on that one, I just feel very strongly.
No, and it's absolutely on the same page, yeah.
I'm curious how you coordinate the relevant plot points in your game with your co-DM. Is there like pre-planning before every session, or are you guys just building on trust and kind of flowing?
Well, I've done mostly like short-term DMing, so it's been talking ahead of time. Even just kind of like writing a little bullet point outline, saying these are the things that we want to see happen, or some mechanics to incorporate them, without necessarily saying this is everything that's going to happen in the game, because everybody knows it never survives the players ever. What do you guys have to add?
So we typically have an idea of where obviously we know where we're starting, and then we have an idea of where we'd like to end things, and so we do have kind of either some specific plot points that we're trying to tell as part of that narrative, whatever that happens to be, and so for us it's all about pre-planning.
You mentioned that already too, with this Jim Money Eyes, having everything handed to you before the game, this is where we're going.
Yeah, well, typically individual NPCs or individual locations will have where the plot points are tied to, and then if it needs to be where the players could basically be anywhere, then you just know which NPCs, you just spread that along like 3 different NPCs, so they all kind of have the same information.
Oh, we've got a couple minutes, let's power through some more. What's up?
So I have a lot of trouble getting my players to be active in the campaign, and most of the time it kind of falls on me to get the plot moving. And I actually end up, if I don't railroad the players, then they don't do anything.
That definitely happens. I would say I've come across that problem usually when I haven't run a session 0 and haven't made sure that I have the right players at the table who want to play the same type of game as me. Sometimes when people lose engagement in my games, it's because they're looking for something different and I'm not providing that. So getting that feedback from your players, sometimes you do have to use your NPCs in the world to really bring people out. Knowing your players' backstories, things like that, putting things in the world that motivate them as players. But I think really, if you may not have the right people at the table for what you're trying to run, but definitely opening up that communication.
I would also add that sometimes it's not even about the players not being a good fit, but just learning like what they're hoping to find from a game of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
So whenever I am doing a group for new people, like they'll have this Barovia, which are like huge and crazy, and all of these people I haven't met, I just kind of did a little survey and was like, do you guys care more about smashing monsters or role play or exploring the world? And then I can take those things that really interest them and try to write a story that makes someone want to feel like they're in that world.
I feel like that's a longer question. I'll stay after if you want to chat about that.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
We can say a lot about that.
Probably got one more.
So right now I'm doing 3 very long-term campaigns that have been going for like 3 years, 1.5, and now a recent one.
Thank
It's
you.
a lot to keep a hold of by yourself, and I've been considering for the beginning. But like I just wondered if you guys have tools or tips that you use to like keep your notes separate and organized. Could you share? Because
I should probably let her answer this one, but anyway. we have just stacks of note cards based on very specific things that we're trying to do. So for our continuity's sake, whenever we run into different groups, run into NPCs, we actually will take notes on those note cards for the NPC on their thoughts on a particular player or how an interaction went, and you know, the telltale, this player will remember that. That's been probably the biggest help. So then when we do run into something, or they want to go somewhere that we hadn't prepared for, we can just grab what we need to and real quick, and it just allows us to go real, kind of keep moving without kind of hindering that.
I think a lot of this is organization methods too. And I'd be happy to stay and talk after that because we need to wrap up. But
Yeah.
Yeah, out of time, but,
World Anvil is incredible.
yeah.
World Anvil you can use for like your entire world, and then if you have a bunch of people playing in the same world, you can actually organize it by different names of the sessions, so it makes it really easy. I'll say after a little bit outside, maybe everybody else wants
Yeah.
to, so if you have questions, we can be outside.
Thanks for joining us, guys. Also,
Thank you, guys.